So I think what we have to recover today, when the educational system became so much connected to capitalism and to the reproduction of class and to the reproduction of knowledge and to the sucking of historical revisionism, I think we have to create parallel systems, alternative educational systems, which are not just educational in the sense you get a book, you read it, and then you do your homework and you get a grade or whatever, and then you go to faculty, and then the market is waiting for you, like very happily you will start to work on the market. I mean, that's the ideology of capitalism. You study hard, in the United States you pay hard, and then in the end you will get a fabulous job. I mean, and of course, as we know, that's not reality.
Sziasztok! A horvátországi szigetén jelentkezünk, itt találkozunk Srećko Horvat filozófussal, a nemzetközi baloldal egyik legizgalmasabb alakjával. Oda az a talán kevésbé ismert a neve, bár például a Diam 25 mozgalomról, amely kifejezetten az Európai Unió demokratizálásáért jött létre, szóval lehet, hogy erről már ti is hallhattatok. Nos, ennek a mozgalomnak az egyik társalapítója Srećko, de emellett oszlopos tagja például a Progressive Internationalnek is. Ezekről is fogunk vele beszélgetni, de azért jöttünk el erre a szigetre, mert itt fogja létrehozni azt az iskolát, amelyel kifejezetten a politikai autonómia gyakorlatát és elméletét fogja majd kutatni, illetve továbbadni az itt tanulóknak. Mindenről, ezen felül pedig partizánokról, Jugoszláviáról és a nemzetközi baloldal előtt álló legfontosabb kihívásokról is fogunk beszélgetni abban a 2 napban, amelyet vele töltöttünk el. Tartsatok velünk, kezdünk!
So one of the biggest problems, and this is the future of love, which we already have here in the present, is that we live in a culture of narcissism, where there is huge inequality. As a consequence, you have anger. Those who are using this anger, this libidinal economy, these emotions, are usually Viktor Orbán, Farage, Le Pen, and name the others. And unfortunately, the so-called European institutions are not helping at all.
So we're sitting in a hotel which was recommended by you, and I think you have a certain nostalgia towards this building, and it represents something about the great era of the Yugoslavian, era for you. And I would like to begin with this entire conversation about what kind of a nostalgia do you feel right now towards the Yugoslavia, and what was lost during the transition into a capitalist society at the beginning of the 90s?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, first of all, I'm glad to be talking to you, and it's a great question because at this spot where we are now talking as if we were ghosts. Those who will listen to us or watch and who will want maybe one day to visit this place won't be able to do it because according to the latest politics and economic interests, this building, this hotel, which has, I think, 300 rooms or something, was built in the 70s during socialist Yugoslavia, will be...
By the state.
By the state, will be destroyed. So by next year or by next time we see each other, we might be ghosts present only there in the camera, you know. In the same way as Yugoslavia is a ghost, or to use Jacques Derrida's term, it's a specter. You know, he talks about the specters of Marx, about the ghosts of Marx, which are, you know, floating around Europe and scaring the bourgeoisie. And I think the same goes for socialist Yugoslavia today. The legacy of socialist Yugoslavia in most of ex-Yugoslavia was erased during the 90s, in that so-called period of transition from communism, from real existing socialism to real existing capitalism, because real existing capitalism is the moment in which we are the main leading global economic model in which most of us are living. And in that sense, I wouldn't consider myself nostalgic because I'm not trying to go back to the past. I'm not trying to glorify the past in a way in which it hasn't been. Of course, whenever you approach history, you always disform. You can never tell how things were. It's always an interpretation. So I can give you a certain interpretation of how I see these things. And maybe the best way is really to start from this place where we are talking today, because this hotel was just one of thousands of similar hotels which were built by famous Yugoslav architects. You know, it's a kind of modernist architecture which started in the 60s and they were being built until the late 80s, until the collapse of Yugoslavia and the brutal war. And they functioned not as private hotels, but they were connected to the factories and to the industry, so that the members of the family of the workers who were working at various factories across Yugoslavia, not just in Croatia, in Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, Slovenia and so on, could either for free or for very cheap money come to have a vacation and enjoy summer. If you compare it to the situation today, just a few days ago I read an article where some journalists made a calculation that a family consisting of 4 people today, mother and father and 2 children, would have to spend 1,500 euros a week to be on the island of Vis, without any food, without going to a restaurant, without anything. So it's just the car, the ferry, and accommodation. So if you compare this situation today, where more than 60% of Croatians cannot afford themselves to go to the sea, you know, imagine all those people.
It's very similar with Balaton, the biggest lake in Hungary.
I know, yeah.
Most of the people in Hungary cannot afford to spend an entire week next to the lake.
Yeah, I mean, that's very sad. And you can see that we are almost in a kind of semi-colonial situation. I mean, if you walk around here, who can afford it? It's the Germans, it's the Scandinavians, it's the Americans, it's the British people, and so on. And I have nothing against them. Many of them are my friends, of course. But you see a certain problem, you know, that during the previous system, socialist Yugoslavia, besides hotels which were serving the purpose not just for tourism but also for the families of the workers to have vacation, socialist Yugoslavia also had big projects of social housing, because housing and to be able to have your own place is a very important thing, as we all know, especially the younger generations. In that sense, I'm not nostalgic, but what I'm trying to show is what were the positive sides of this system, and definitely this hotel, although it will be destroyed, was definitely a positive side through which, like in Borges' story Aleph, you can look in and then see, you know, the whole history of the 20th century of real existing socialism. This is one of the caves on the island of Vis. There are 2 caves which were used during the partisan period of 1944. In this cave where we are today, there was a big table, and this is the place where the main leadership of the partisan guerrilla movement at that time was strategizing. Basically, they discussed the future of Yugoslavia here. So what you have on Vis, why I think this island and this cave is also important, because I think it shows at least 3 important lessons of this partisan struggle, even for today. First is in which ways during a war the anti-fascist struggle took place, like in conditions when, you know, these caves were completely hidden, there were Nazis all around, they were flying over the island, you had concentration camps operating in Jasenovac, in other parts of Croatia, in Belgrade, and it was a very dangerous moment. So it's very useful to see in which way they succeeded to create this anti-fascist movement. What's important is that they are, I think, the only ones in Europe who succeeded to turn the war, the Second World War, into a revolution. And I think it shows in which way they were capable to organize, but also to have a victory in the sense to create a socialist system out of the Second World War. And in a way, if the Second World War didn't happen, maybe they didn't succeed. The second one, I think, is something which would become famous for the socialist, real existing socialist Yugoslav experiment. It's called self-management, which, you know, didn't exist in many other socialists. That's the difference, I think, between the Soviet Union, you know, the Stalinist model, and the Yugoslav model in the 20th century. So the idea that the workers themselves, the proletariat, and the people have to self-organize, and that there is no one above who will. Of course, that we can come to the negative sides that didn't really function, but on these they started with self-management in a way. And the third reason why I think they are important is, and you can see it on this island, is this is the first time in 44 when Tito arrives, so that's June 44, that they gain a much bigger geopolitical relevance. So they start to negotiate with the allies. The allies realize, especially Churchill, that without the partisans they will not be able to win the Second World War. And I think that might be a lesson for our days today, you know, that when the conservatives when the liberals or even the conservatives realize that they have to support the far left or the socialists.
You said you're not a Titoist. Why is that? So do you think his political heritage is too toxic, it's not useful, or
no,
what?
I don't like the kind of Tito-nostalgia which exists in Yugoslavia. You know, when Tito dies, everyone goes to his hometown, birth town of Kumrovec, have all these memorabilia and glorify the past. Although I think that in all nostalgia, so also in Tito nostalgia, you also have a kind of emancipatory potential, because people are looking back to the past because they are not satisfied with the present. And they use the past in order to criticize the present and to try to create a different future. When it comes to Tito, I think what we have to do here in ex-Yugoslavia is to say what was positive out of his legacy, and there are many positive things. I mean,
Non-aligned movement.
Non-aligned movement, anti-fascist struggle, self-management, which means economic democracy, and not to mention, you know, in socialist Yugoslavia we had free healthcare, free education, which of course from the US perspective sounds completely mad, but crazy, because they have to pay for everything. We had social housing. Thousands and tens of thousands homes were built, which were then given to people to use it, and so on. If you compare it to our situation today, Croatia, but also other countries, I mean, this country here, if there wasn't tourism, and we saw it during the 2 years of the pandemic, it would crash down completely, because that's the only way of income. It's a service economy. Croatia is almost not producing anything anymore. Socialist Yugoslavia was producing cars, refrigerators, big ships, building, and so on. And as you said, with the non-aligned movement, they cooperated mainly with Asian and African countries, which I also think is something which we have to cherish today and rethink today, and also maybe rebuild in the way what Samir Amin called, the Egyptian economist, delinking, you know, to delink from the global economy of capitalism, and countries who are progressive, who have economic democracy or are experimenting with different social economic formations should cooperate more, and especially the global south. So basically what you had in Europe was that in the middle of Europe during the Cold War, you had a country which was non-aligned, which was real existing socialism, which wasn't so Stalinist, and which succeeded to build a lot. I mean, from the visible infrastructure to the immaterial infrastructure, like healthcare or education or vaccines, for instance, which was.
But why the distance then from Tito?
A distance, I would say, it's a criticism of the failures he did, and he definitely did failures, because I think no leader who is in power for 40 years almost, that just cannot hold. Here from this, if you look there, you know, all this part from until there, this is Dalmatia, then comes Montenegro, Bosnia behind the hills, Serbia, Slovenia. This was all a socialist country which was functioning together with a common economy, with a common culture, and part of the non-aligned movement. You know, it was a powerful force. So compared to the situation today, when this island is heavily dependent on tourism and the whole country lives only because of tourism, that was a period when actually this country was successful. And there were also negative sides, I mean, which we have to talk about. They didn't confront themselves with the negative sides. Lack of democracy in the media, lack of democracy on the workplace, although there was the idea of self-management, not confronting themselves with the crimes of the past, which we, the new generation today, have to confront ourselves. You know, when someone asks me, okay, you're building a school near Tito's cave, they would say, okay, what does that mean? Are you a Titoist? What are you doing? You're trying to recreate Titoism or whatever. No, not at all. But we shouldn't be ashamed of this past, because if there wasn't Tito in this cave and the partisan guerrilla movement, this island would probably be Nazi, German. It wouldn't be Croatian, in the same way as Istria, you know.
I'm very interested about your position in current contemporary Croatian politics, because it seems to me that you are a bright and very well accepted mind and activist and thinker of the international left. And it seems to me that you are more involved in the international sphere than the local Croatian field or sphere. So what is your current position?
I have no idea. I mean, you would have to ask something called Croatia. If you can ask a state, what's my position? But definitely I was much more involved in Croatian, I would say, first of all, yeah, politics, and then also culture, theater, arts, before, you know, when I was still studying at the Faculty of Philosophy in Zagreb. I was part of the occupations of the faculty. I was active in the Right to the City movement. which was against the privatization of public spaces. Later, I co-founded the Subversive Festival in 2008 in Zagreb, which became a hotspot for the, I would say, post-Yugoslav left and Greens, but also international left and green movements.
But you quit after 6 or 7 years, and you said that there were political differences between you and the other organizers. Can you explain it to us? What were these differences?
Yeah, maybe just before I explain. I just want to give a context of the Subversive Festival, so those who don't know anything about it could understand also your question. I mean, in 5 years, it became really one of the biggest festivals of its kind.
Absolutely, the end with it, absolutely.
Yeah, and we had like not just big guests from the daughter of Che Guevara, Leida Guevara, Alexis Tsipras just before he became prime minister, Yanis Varoufakis just before he became finance minister. They actually met at the Subversive Festival. Silvia Federici, David Harvey, Zygmunt Bauman, some of them are dead unfortunately already, like Zygmunt Bauman, Samir Amin, you know, giants of radical theory, I would say. Oliver Stone, but what was most important to us was also, on the one hand, the film program. We showed a lot of Godard, we showed a lot of contemporary movies which are subversive, and also we connected different movements. It was, I would say, for the first time after the collapse of Yugoslavia that you had such public event where different social movements from Bosnia, Slovenia, Serbia were coming together against this nationalist ideology which was, you know, put on our backs when we were kids. At one moment it became so successful that big companies, I'm coming to the answer to your question, became rather interested in the festival. I mean, since the very beginning we didn't have a problem to take money even from corporations, I must say. And a lot of people from the left criticized us. But our answer was always, you know, we will take it as long as they don't have any kind of conditions. So we are not making a promotion for you. We will not put your, you know, big logo or show an ad before every film we show or before every lecture. One point I remember, that was the last Subversive Festival I was doing. Oliver Stone was our guest. And Peugeot was our sponsor, you know, the car company Peugeot.
Oh, Peugeot, yeah, okay.
Which at that time was not that bad as it is today, in the way after the green movement and climate movement and so on. But they made conditions. Like one of their conditions was that before every movie and before every lecture, imagine Zizek giving a lecture, there is a short ad showing a Peugeot car, you know, which is usual at other film festivals. Yes. That's completely normal. Yes. But for me, that was the kind of red line. We are not doing that. I mean, I also remember a press conference. At that time, Oliver Stone gave, I was together with him, and then one journalist asked him, which is a kind of question, you know, it shows that it's not that easy, this question, in which way left or subversive groups operate. So what a journalist asked him, so Mr. Stone, a Peugeot car waited for you at the airport, brought you to the Subversive Festival. What's subversive in the festival if a big car company is sponsoring the festival? So, I mean, if you look around here, I mean, all this equipment you have, I can see Sony, I can see whatever, it's like another Sony, and, you know, computers and so on. I mean, also me, I use computers, I use the means of capitalism in order to subvert it. I mean, that was the whole point of the festival. But the question is, how long do you continue? What's the point when a subversion is co-opted? What's the point when you're not anymore the active player and the one who decides how the program will look like, what are the goals of the program, and when this line is blurred between subversion and co-optation. And I think this is still a question I'm struggling with today. Still, you know, I'm not like those naive anarchists or leftists, although I would rather consider myself anarchist than socialist or communist.
What's the difference for you between the two categories?
Well, maybe I can give a joke. You know, when I'm among communists, I would always play the anarchist card, because what I think they miss is more self-organization, mutual aid, anarchist concepts of the state or how to function without the state. But when I meet with the anarchists, I would maybe just out of provocation go more Marxist, because I think what is necessary there is also some sort of central organization. So I think we need a sort of combination between what is best in anarchism and Marxism in the creation of institutions. I think definitely what is missing also in contemporary Marxism is to envisage different social formations which are not necessarily state formations. And
are you anti-state? So do you think that we should get rid of state as a kind of a form of government?
Ideally, yes. Yeah, but we could discuss how to do it, whether it's in the short term, long term, and so on, because I think it's becoming much more complicated with the current climate crisis and the kind of threats humanity and the planet faces, where you can see that what is needed more and more, on the one hand, is, the pandemic showed it, for instance, it's self-organization. We need more self-organization, which is much closer to the theory and praxis of anarchism, but at the same time you need a coherent, efficient, central organization, because in 10, 20 years, if you have hundreds of millions of refugees, you cannot self-organize the transfer of them or sheltering them. You need institutions. So I'm at the same time, in a way, anarchist. What I'm doing here on the island is trying to build something from the scratch, self-organized, collective, mutual aid, experiment with modern technology, traditional technology, but at the same time, I'm definitely for the, not for the reform, but for the radical transformation of existing world institutions, you know.
I think everyone in the left knows very well the story of János Varoufakis, that how we tried to, you know, put the pressure on the EU institutions and how they said, fuck off. And then he decided to go outside of the government, and he launched with you and with others the N25 movement. My question is that, what do you think, are these institutions of the EU can be reformed and can be democratized? Because it seems to me that historically they are the outcome of an elite project.
The first answer is no. They have never been democratic. Could they be democratic? Maybe, perhaps. I'm not that sure anymore today. I mean, I was a bit more naive before, I would say.
What made the change in your thinking about it? I'm very curious about that.
What changes? It's for instance, the experience of running for elections for the European elections. Like we were running in Germany, because me and Yanis, we found, and you did, and our comrades in DM, we found a blind spot in the German law that if you apply your residence in Germany half a year before the European elections, even if you're not a German national, you're a citizen, you can run for elections. Our complete budget for the campaign in Germany was something between 30,000–40,000 euros, which is, you know, for running in Germany. Two idiots, you know, from the Balkans, one from Greece, not really famous in Germany, one from Croatia, not that known in Germany, and a movement which is pretty radical. We succeeded to get, I think, 130,000 votes, which is a lot for a party which was established half a year ago before the European elections. But we didn't get any MP. We ran as a transnational list, sort of transnational list all over the place, in Greece, in France, in many other countries. Altogether, I think, with our coalition partners, we reached more than 2 million votes, but we didn't get any single MP. I mean, we even had Pamela Anderson as a good friend of mine who was on the posters for the Green New Deal, so it created a kind of, what's happening? Wait, what is Pamela Anderson doing on the streets? She came to Berlin, we campaigned together. You know, I remember a scene in front of the Brandenburger Tor where like 30 policemen came to Pamela and asked her for a photograph and so on. So we know that the police in Germany is very violent and right as well, but it shows that her name and presence really provoked an interest. But even with all of that, we didn't succeed. There was another political party called Volt, the more liberal party, which succeeded to get a few MPs in the European Parliament. I think, I'm not sure, they can correct me, their budget was something like 300,000–400,000 euros. So how can we speak about, and some of the sponsors were the biggest ship builders from some German cities, you know. So how can we speak about democracy today if democracy depends on the economy? If you want to run for elections, you obviously already need to have a network of economic investment into your project, movement, or political party, which would then fulfill some of the political economic interests of those who are sponsoring you. I mean, DiEM25 will run for the next European elections. Maybe this is a kind of exclusive because we are now discussing it in 2024. And it might be the last chance because also our movement is called the Democracy in Europe Movement 2000.
You will have 1 year if you will succeed. Let's imagine, you know, a sci-fi scenario. If DiEM would have majority in the parliament, you wouldn't even be able to, you know, push any subversive, change. So it is important to democratize the European Parliament, despite the fact that it was designed to be not democratic at all.
Yeah, I don't think that you can necessarily. It's a pertinent question, important one, because it brings us into the field of political strategy, I would say, yes. First and foremost. Yes. So I don't think that you can democratize the European Parliament, but you can use it. You can subvert it. I mean, the best example of someone who really succeeded to subvert and to use his position in the European Parliament was, surprise, surprise, Nigel Farage. Every event or talk he had in the European Parliament, which actually helped to accelerate Brexit. So you can see that the European Parliament can be used for such big events. I mean, Brexit was a terminal event for the European Union, a historic event for the future of the European Union and for the future for Great Britain. And I think the European Parliament played an important role there. Mm-hmm. So you can also make some, little proposals there, blah, 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 and so on. But I don't think that it can radically change the situation, which doesn't mean that we don't have to aspire to do it. Because I would say, speaking about political strategy, I would say that whoever wants to, I'm not interested in that anymore. I was running for the European Parliament. I'm not going to run for the next election.
Really?
I'm not. I know now after this conversation, Varoufakis will call me and shout at me and say, "Are you crazy? Why not?" And he will try to force me to run. I'm just fed up with that, I mean, traveling every day in trains, in cars. It was a very exciting moment for me to travel with Yanis and to speak in front of thousands of people. And the European elections also for other reasons are important, because you can use the European elections, as we did, to internationalize, Europeanize questions and to speak about the disbalance between the center of the European Union and the periphery of the European Union, between Germany and France and Greece and our periphery countries, and in which way our countries became a source for extraction of cheap labor, extraction of national resources, extraction of private assets, and so on. So, and in which way the European Union itself serves those business interests. So in that way, I think the European elections are definitely important, but I'm afraid, I'm not going to do that.
What's the importance of this island in your life? Because you were writing already of this island in your previous book, and you were writing beautifully about the history of the island, which was occupied by the Yugoslavian army at the beginning of the 90s. Then it was opened for tourism and opened for other people outside of the world. It was the location of the second part of Mamma Mia. So tourism came and it transformed heavily, dramatically, the nature of the island. And still, you decided to, surprise, establish your school on this very island. So what is your relation with the island, and why did you choose this location to establish the school?
Yeah, so I was rather young, in young 20s. When I was coming with friends, we were first camping and so on, and we really fell in love with it, because the rest of Croatia was already heavily transformed by tourism, But this, in a way, ironically, precisely because of the presence of the Yugoslav army until the 90s, was preserved. Because no foreign tourists were allowed, no construction was allowed, and it took time until that appeared as well. I mean, this island is definitely not destroyed in the way other islands are. I think it was, the reason is, first I fell in love with the nature and with the island and how far away it is.
Were you aware of that point of the history?
Yeah,
in relation to Tito and the Partisans?
Yeah, I was, but only when I started to live here most of the period. I would dig deeper, talk to locals, visit locations. I mean, here on this island, every stone speaks a story. Every house was either a refugee center or a base or an illegal radio. I mean, the future Yugoslav newspaper agency was founded in another cave, which is on that part of the island. So the whole island was basically, it tells a lot of stories. And then later, after this fascination with this period, I became also fascinated with other parts of the history, like Issa. This island was also the first polis in the Adriatic Sea, founded by Dionysius the Elder from Syracuse, who was the guy who imprisoned Plato. There is a theory that Plato might have been here as well, testing his philosophy. There is no evidence yet, because I think 95% of old Issa is still under the ground. But I think the history of the island and the Mediterranean is something which fascinates me.
What kind of a school it will be? So it will be kind of a sanatorium for burned out political activists to come and rest?
No.
Or it will be a school dedicated to what?
I would kill myself if I had, these burnout activists coming all the time, and then you have to, please recover. But the idea is to build a headquarters up there on hill, and it's called the School of Autonomy. ISA, like the old name of the polis, but it stands for Island School for Studying Autonomy. And we have many co-founders from Franco Berardi, Bifo, Median Gruppe Bitnik, Gael Garcia Bernal, many friends from all over the world. And basically it's a combination of theory and praxis. And praxis is really very important for us. So we are reconstructing an old stone house, which you will see. We are, building solar panels, experiment with water collection. So, I mean, it's more like a school of philosophy, which of course will have activists, but many other people. So the idea is basically to transform the hill and the land and the stone house to build many more constructions, sustainable ones, have the ability to host, at the beginning, 30, 50 people, like an astronomist in residence, a permaculturist in residence, a philosopher in residence, an activist in residence, for instance, and have 20 people up there who can work together without this constant acceleration to which we are forced, whether through work, social media, constant connection, but to be in a kind of environment which enables us to really rethink. Because I think today it's not just enough, just jump on the street, protest, but to actually think how can we be more efficient? What kind of future do we need? What is really autonomy? In which way human beings can be more autonomous, not that much dependent, whether it's the state or the market or something else. And what's happening now on the island, what I really like is that more and more people, similar kind, are coming, buying land, building their own stuff. So we're already connected. So in the future, we might build an even bigger parallel social system, to put it like that. And what we are doing now is a lot of physical labor, but we also started some philosophical conversations on the meaning of the school, what would it mean, because the idea is not just to have something here, but actually to have an idea which can then inspire many other similar experiments, yeah.
Maybe take a look on the construction?
Huh?
Maybe take a look on
Yeah, sure, but we have to walk like 30 minutes.
Yeah. Let's go then. I envy your imagination because you picked this place to build up your school where there is no infrastructure, so no electricity, no tap water, nothing at all. And you have to bring up all the materials by yourself in your hands. So when will be the school here?
It's already here.
Okay.
So, I mean, this is part of the school. We are already operating.
So we are part of education right
now. You're part of the re-education, but in a good way, not in the Tito way, So, I mean, we started, 1.5 years ago. There was just this stone house. This path here, which you can see, was here. We reconstructed this stone wall, and what we are doing now is to reconstruct the whole house. And, I mean, when I say it started already, I don't think the school is a location. I don't think the school is a material object necessarily. I mean, this is a symbolic place. So I think what we have to recover today, when the educational system became so much connected to capitalism and to the reproduction of class and to the reproduction of knowledge and to the sucking of historical revisionism, I think we have to create parallel systems, alternative educational systems, which are not just educational in the sense you get a book, you read it, and then you do your homework and you get a grade or whatever, and then you go to faculty, and then the market is waiting for you, like very happily you will start to work on the market. I mean, that's the ideology of capitalism. You study hard, in the United States you pay hard, and then in the end you will get a fabulous job. I mean, and of course, as we know, that's not reality. What I think we have to do today is to connect different levels of knowledge and praxis. So one of the ideas is that, because we have, you saw it there, we have this traditional water tank, so we're combining traditional methods, which is mainly stone and wood, with some new technology. You didn't see much of new technology here except the electric wheel, but what we will try to do in the next year, and we need help, so we need you, whoever there is, I don't know, We will try to build, not here but up, because the land is going up there, water collectors, which a few years ago they started to construct it in Peru, Tunisia, Morocco, which actually can collect water from clouds. And if you think this is crazy, I mean, yeah, this whole project is very crazy, but there hasn't been rain on the island for 6 months. I mean, 2 or 3 days ago there was, we don't call it rain, it was raining for 1 hour, you know, that's nothing. It cannot fill anything of the water tank, and it's not enough for olives, for vineyards and so on. So obviously what we are facing here already is climate crisis as well. The island is changing, there are more and more droughts. The Mediterranean is changing as well. They say in 10-20 years it might become as a sort of tropical sea. I mean, already the last years we have invasive species which are coming from the Red Sea and from the Atlantic. So probably in 10 or 20 years our children won't be able to enjoy the same Mediterranean as we are today. So it's not ambitious. I mean, it might look ambitious, like a sort of Mediterranean Fitzgeraldo, you know, completely crazy, carrying so much material up that you work in traditional methods. But I think that's the beauty of it. And I think, you know, what also most of our generation, if I can put it like that, but also younger generations, I think they're all so much immersed in the acceleration of capitalism, social networks, that you get everything very quickly. Tinder, Grindr, just to name 2 examples, you know, you want sex, you go there, you get it, blah. I think what we have to recover is also this sense of temporality where you have to work hard to get something. But, you know, this kind of work for me is, I'm talking from a privileged position, because 100 years ago, someone here wouldn't have this ability as me to work on the computer and then come to work a few days a week here and so on. They maybe hated it to climb up. I love it every time I take a bag, give me another bag, you know, it's like, it's pure joy. But the whole idea is that's inspired by Ivan Illich as well, that you don't have a distinction between the teacher and the pupil, between the teacher and the one who is learning, because I'm here learning as well. I mean, I don't know shit how to reconstruct. Look at this. I've never done this in my life. But there are local people, luckily, on the island who know something. So each time I learn how to build a stone wall, I still don't know how to do it properly. Next time I learn something. I'm not afraid to say I don't know anything and to ask, because the only way to learn is to ask questions. And to wonder as well. I mean, that's the original philosophy, taumazein, to, you know, be in constant wonder. You know, how is it possible that someone 200 years ago built this house here without any kind of contemporary technology? Like with just human force and donkeys, and why did they do it? And I think this brings me also closer to the very concept of the school, which is, you know, the school of autonomy, the concept of autonomy, in which way it's important to dream about it, but also to try build it in a way today. You know, many people dream about it. One day I will be in the Mediterranean, sit here, drink a glass of bevanda or wine or whatever, and just relax. I mean, do it today, but don't do it as a private thing. Do it as a common thing. You know, the whole idea of this is it's a collective thing.
Show me the water tank.
Okay, let me show you the water tank. Basically, this is the
only thing you close.
Huh?
This is the only thing you close.
And the door.
That's the most prestigious thing.
Yeah. So all of this was built 120 years ago. I mean, later they reconstructed it a bit and so on. And I can show you how it works. That doesn't matter. Just imagine that this water is rainwater, and then if you put it like this, it has to go down. I mean, that's a low amount of water, but basically when the rain falls, all the rain goes down here. This is around 30 square meters, I guess. And then when you have the roof on the house, also the water from the house goes down. And that was the kind of method they were building 200 years ago, probably in Greek times as well. Yeah. And I think with our future now, with climate crisis, people
This is the way to get water.
Yeah, but that won't be enough. I think we really need cloud collectors.
Okay. You are an organizer, an activist and so on, but you are also a philosopher. So please explain to me that what is the role of philosophy in radical politics?
Yeah, I would say the role of philosophy is, and it always was to pose the right questions. Not necessarily to give the right answers, but to question everything, even when you think that you arrived at the right answer, to question this answer itself. So applied to radical social movements, I think we definitely need more philosophy. We need more theory, not just praxis, but also theory which would be able to shed light on the things which we take for granted. Like one example is the Green New Deal. I'm glad that many of the progressives are today talking or envisaging different versions of the Green New Deal, but to be satisfied with these answers, I think already brings us in a position of not being radical enough. And it also doesn't prepare us for what is coming. And I think here is the role of philosophy also, if you want a sort of critical speculative fiction, if you want, is what we need. You know, what Günther Anders, the German philosopher who influenced my last book After the Apocalypse a lot, what he's claiming that we have to already imagine our death in the same way we imagined it here when we started our conversation, that we are already ghosts. I deeply believe that in this past, which will be passed to someone who is watching us, there will be seeds for a future which can be better. And I think the philosophy itself is crucial for that. Political action, as important as it is not everything. And as much as politics and the economy in the, in that way influence our daily lives and decide about our daily lives and realities, that's not all. I mean, philosophy is important in the same way art, literature is important, because it opens the horizons of what is possible, because it opens the horizons of potentialities of not only imagining different worlds, but creating them. While classical politics and daily politics as we have today is very often constrained in a very short time frame, I think we need philosophy and radical thinking and theory in order to understand what is happening, because only by understanding it we will be able to change it. And I think very often people just run to change something without even understanding it, which of course is a nice position and people should protest, but protesting itself is not enough. You know, you should also pose the question, what will happen after this protest the next day? Do we have an infrastructure organization, how to lead the protest further? What is our main aim? Is our main aim to get power in a municipality or in the state? I'm afraid, yeah, that's a big aim for many progressives, but for me that's definitely not sufficient. I want to think about the sea, about how this island was created by an underwater volcano 220 million years ago, and why up there on the church there is really fertile land now because it's a result of a previous catastrophe. You know, what is our today's democracy, the European Parliament, European elections, our contemporary crisis compared to the events which happened on planet Earth? And I think we need to get out of this daily reality and to pose the questions which are much bigger than ourselves.
I was partly asking this because I read in an article which was written by you in 2014 at Al Jazeera, and I found it very interesting that you said, and I quote you, "And the only left capable of changing its own future is a left without a beautiful soul, ready to get its hands dirty." What does getting our hands dirty mean, and how philosophy can help in order to achieve it?
Yeah, I mean, the 2014, Jesus, that was 1 year before the Ohi referendum, yeah. I mean, in that I just have to remember when did I write it.
But in the other context, I think it still resonates and it still has a relevance. And it's not just, the international left, it's the Hungarian left, which is struggling also with this kind of concept of, getting to power, you have to do necessary things.
Yep.
What are those necessary things, and originally, what does it mean, getting our hands dirty?
Yeah, it means that you dive into a social political reality and you don't know how it will end up, and that you have to do things which you would not prefer to do. I mean, organizing, I've been organizing for a decade and more now, less than many other people's, but organizing itself is very difficult. It's not just that you have an event with Yanis Varoufakis or whoever and you have 1,000 people in a theater or you have sexy campaigns or whatever. It's having meetings every bloody day. Yeah. And it's like what Oscar Wilde said famously, socialism will never succeed because the meetings are too long. And, it's very difficult to do all of that stuff. And what is even more difficult, what you probably see, I see 6 of you came from Hungary. to shoot this conversation, and we were yesterday at the school and we visited that. But I guess even in your small group, you have different relations between each of you. Someone one day has a hangover, the other one is pissed off, someone had a bad day because of a relationship, someone's father died or whatever. Yeah. So what you have to do, even in a small group of 6 people, not to mention thousands of people of a movement, is to constantly deal with what Lyotard would call the libidinal economy. So it's not the political economy, but the economy of desire, the economy of emotions, and so on. And that's rather difficult, you know. And in that way, sometimes you have to put your hands dirty, not in the sense that you have to kill someone or something, God forbid, but that you have to do things which you would not be happy to do. You have to fire someone sometimes. I mean, that's also what people in companies have the experience at, but to fire someone in a social movement is a much more difficult situation. Yes. And to come back to your question, you know, the very term, the beautiful soul, was coined by Hegel. But what I think today we should also use is George Lukács, who at one point was, I guess, more relevant in Hungary as well, who had a beautiful article which was called Hotel Aufhebung. In German, it would be the Hotel Abyss. Abyss, you know, when you look down, and he was criticizing the Frankfurt School, saying that the members of the Frankfurt School during the Second World War, but also later, during '68, were in their beautiful, everyone had a room at the hotel, there was a bar for cocktails, there was a room for jazz, you could do whatever you want, and you just look like from here towards the abyss, go back to your room, there is food and so on, and you don't participate in the political reality. When I talk about that sometimes you have to get your hands dirty, it means that sometimes you have to get out of the bloody hotel, you know? You have to get out and look at the abyss and to look how people live and to try to understand the situation. And you also have to be there at the protests. You have to be part of a certain social reality. You know, also in Croatia, before Možemo, we had a lot of people on the left who were like sitting in their beautiful hotel, I mean, metaphorically. And well, they were criticizing, every day criticizing, you're not radical enough, you're not left enough, this policy is bullshit, and so on. And then after they wrote the article, they would go to another room in the hotel and listen to jazz. I mean, to put it metaphorically. And I think especially those people should also risk, because taking part in politics is a big risk. So in that sense, yeah, it takes a risk to get out of the hotel. You don't know what will happen. You might lose your room, your beautiful room at the hotel, and never be able to return back. But that's the risk of politics, and someone has to do it.
And right now we arrive to our very last subject, and who else could it be than Viktor Orbán? And I'm very interested about your opinion on that. In the past 12 years, despite the fact that he is selling nationalist politics to the people, he built up a very effective international community around him. So he's not just respected by the American right wing, but he has very close connection to the Republican Party. He has very close connection to Bolsonaro, to Putin, and to everywhere who is promoting right-wing ideas on the international field. And I think there is something which we, from the left, can learn from him. Do you agree that there are lessons we should take from the successes of the Orbáns, the Bolsonaros, or even the other autocrat leaders in other countries in the world?
Unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, yes. I mean, one of the reasons why we founded the Progressive International was exactly that a few years ago we said there is a capitalist and fascist international, so we need a progressive international as well. Because what we can see, you explained it very well, those people are operating on the international level. You know, they will sell the idea to their voters that they will have a clean Hungary, they will erect a wall, and no one will be able to come in. But the next day, Orbán will meet another autocrat, Alexander Vučić, and together they will cooperate on various economic questions so that their friends could get more rich. I mean, I'm simplifying, but that's politics today, you know. They are doing political deals so that their friends or themselves could get rich. That's it. I mean, it always was that, you know, in that kind of politics. So if they are that good organized, I think we have to be even better organized. And in that sense, internationalism is so important because they have successful networks. They're also dealing with different Silicon Valley companies. I mean, if you look at the success of Nigel Farage, or Bolsonaro, you will see that contemporary technologies were very important for them to reach power. In the case of Bolsonaro, it was, among other things, it was WhatsApp. In the case of Brexit, but also Trump, it was a company called Cambridge Analytica and Facebook. So you can see that, that's something which made them much more successful in their network, I would say, as well. And also what might be learned from them, I would say, is not the narrative, but in which way they are able to simplify a narrative. Their narrative is very simple. It reaches people because it's usually us against them. Those will come, they will steal your job. We, whether it's Hungary, Croatia, or whoever, have a history which goes back to the dinosaurs, probably. They are also Hungarians, probably, or Croatians, I don't know. And they have this big mythology. But here we come back then, I think, besides organization and strategy on the international level, we also need to be able to provide a counter-narrative which is simple, but which is attractive at the same time. But which is based in a policy and a program which we have, which is not just propaganda or populism, but something which, can recreate economic and social conditions in a certain society. So, for instance, you mentioned the climate movement before. I mean, it's great that the climate movement today is that influential, that many young kids are joining it, and that it's on almost everyone's lips. But what is still missing there is, for instance, you will have many representatives of the climate movement saying, we need to get rid of fossil fuels, so we will not travel anymore in fossil fuel cars. And many of them at the same time will adopt electric cars. And then you will see that parts of the climate movement are not actually able to get out of the trap of consumerism, and they're not able to go beyond and to reach at the most pertinent question, which is the question of ownership. Why cars at all? Why would cars be privately owned? I mean, I love driving a car because I told you yesterday, I guess, a driving license recently, and I love to drive.
Me too.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
When did you get it?
3 weeks ago.
Really?
Yeah.
Congratulations. It took me 1 year to get it.
Wow.
Like I got several exams. I don't know. I'm a philosopher. I don't know.
Maybe it's easier in Hungary.
Yeah, I guess. No, Croatia is really difficult, yeah,
Really?
for driving license, yeah. But the most frustrating thing for me was, I don't know whether for you as well, you still don't have a driving license, you drive your car and you see all those bastards who are constantly breaking the rules, not knowing how to drive.
Yeah,
and
never use the index and so on, yeah.
And you think like, yeah, those guys have a driving license and I don't. And I came back to school, I felt like so useless, But anyhow, I think the question...
But that's a great contradiction because, driving a vehicle is so joyful. I love to drive my car. But on the other hand, yes, I understand that, yes, it destroys the planet, it is bad for the planet. But to put it in another way, yes, I can get rid of my car. I can get rid of, driving my car. But still, 5% of the entire CO2 emission and what about, the factories in China? What about, fossil fuel, factories? And what about, coal factories and so on?
And not only that, I mean, maybe you and me could get rid of our cars.
Yeah.
Because we have a kind of lifestyle or abilities to travel differently. But I think for the vast majority of the population who live in small villages, like I give you an example from Croatia. During the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, I'm glad to speak to you. There is this joke in Monty Python which says, like, what have the Romans ever done for us?
Yeah.
Except the viaducts, the infrastructure, the roads. I mean, on this island, 8 schools were built by the Austro-Hungarian monarchy. 8 schools. Like on Bishovo, we cannot see it from here. There's another island there. There was a school built in 1891. 1891, that's 130 years ago, on an island which now has 5 inhabitants. Vis, at the beginning of the century, during the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, had more than 10,000 people. Now it's around 3,000. And so certain empires have actually left also some good stuff, to put it like that. Although I'm completely against the new Hungarian Orbán ideology that, the Adriatic Sea is suddenly Hungarian as well. I mean, fuck off, it's the Mediterranean.
Unfortunately not.
Yeah, from your position, I know, but go back to Balaton, as Orbán said, and swim there. No, I'm glad that you're here, and I think this this is the sea, the ocean, it's commons.
Yes,
I mean, how
absolutely.
can you ascribe a nationality to a sea? So, I mean, that's another question, but yeah, how did we come here? So, back to cars.
We were talking about the cars, and, you know,
Yeah.
so I think that's a great misunderstanding of the left, that yes, I can get rid of my private, I don't know, things like owning a car and driving a car, but the problem is that there are structured, so yes, the problem is owning a car and owning, I don't know, an electrical car and a fossil fuel car, that makes no difference, because still an electric car in some ways even more toxic than a fossil fuel one, and so on and so on. So you can, so I think, you know, we are talking a lot about individual levels of, I don't know, responsibility, and never talking about, you know, the structural ones.
Absolutely. I mean, what another example why I mentioned Monty Python and the Austro-Hungarian monarchy is not just the schools, but if you take the infrastructure, the railroads, which were built during that period, from Zagreb connecting Belgrade, for instance.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you cannot even reach Belgrade anymore, where you've been able, because the Vučić government, together with Arab capital, destroyed the railway station, the central railway station, and they built skyscrapers, a new city, a new Dubai for the poor, to put it like that, where now Russians are buying apartments in the middle of Belgrade. And so now you come with this, even if you are green movement, you come with this idea, yeah, you should get rid of your car because it's polluting the environment. But I'm sorry, someone who is living in Našice, in Slavonski Brod, in Zaječar, or I don't know in which little town or village in the post-Yugoslav space, the railway was ruined by our governments and during the last decades. And unfortunately, also there is no public transport, and they are simply forced to use the car to come from the village to the town to work, for instance. So yes, you're right, this is a structural question, this is a structural problem, and unless you solve the structural problem, you won't solve these kind of situations. I mean, the same with the energy crisis in Europe. Now they are talking, oh, you should shower less, you should put your heat on that. Yeah, I mean, yes, of course we should do that, of course. I mean, people are having AC on at 18 degrees, that's ridiculous. I mean, you will go out when it's 40 outside and you will immediately have a heart attack. I mean, it's ridiculous, and you're spending a lot of energy. But that's not the solution for our contemporary crisis, you know, and that was always this, like, individualization of something which is a structural problem, and then also consumerism, which then you have now with green capitalism. Yeah, we will all drive electric cars and live happily ever after, without posing the question, why wouldn't we? I mean, Elon Musk is digging those tunnels in Los Angeles.
Yes.
Or whatever.
Absolutely ridiculous.
It's completely ridiculous. So he wants to get rid of the traffic jams up, and then he puts the cars down. Did you hear about the railway? I mean, the Austro-Hungarians did it 150 years ago. It's really ridiculous. And then you see why we don't have investment into railways, because some big private companies, the car industry, which is really strong in Europe still, doesn't have an interest in it. They want to destroy the rail. They don't need the rail. They want each single idiot in their own car filling gasoline for the end of the life. The oil industry wants it. Everyone wants it, you know. And now, maybe in the future, in 10 years, we will all, you and me as well, drive an electric car. But I'm afraid this will just not change the situation.
Srećko, thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for your openness towards my questions. I have something for you, and I brought this from a very great Hungarian painter, a friend of mine called Csaba Nemes, and he painted this, or drafted this, and I would love to give it to you, and I would like to hang it on one of the walls of your school when you open it. And maybe, you know, it's not the nations we have to create. But maybe we can, you know, recreate, you know, the meaning of nation, and then this kind of, you know, sentence will have the right meaning.
Yeah, I think the painting it's beautiful, and thanks a lot for the present. But, you know, if you allow me that I become an artist as well, we will just cross out the nation.
Whatever you want, it's yours.
And put autonomy, building up a new autonomy. I think that's what we need. And I like the painting because what we are doing is we don't have bricks, but we have stone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks a lot for this, and great success with your podcast and the program you're doing.
I think that our listeners and our viewers will love this conversation.
Let's see. Orban will definitely love it. And you know that he visited Vis once?
Yeah. He loves the Adriatic Sea.
I know, but in Hungary
he offers baloldalon to the nation, but he prefers
smart guy.
The sea, yes.
But also very cynical guy.
Absolutely.
And dangerous. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
Nagyon köszi a figyelmet, ez volt a találkozásom és a beszélgetésem Srećko Horváttal Horvátországban, szigetén. Ha tetszett a beszélgetés, mindenképpen iratkozz fel a csatornára, ha még nem tetted volna meg. Ha pedig bármilyen kérdésed vagy észrevételed lenne az elhangzottakkal kapcsolatban, akkor várlak a komment szekcióban. Ha megteheted, kérlek, hogy szállj be a finanszírozásunkba, hogy még több ilyen interjút készíthessünk. Ehhez a lehetőségeket megtalálod a leírásban található linkeken keresztül. Nagyon köszönöm még egyszer a figyelmed, én Gulyás Márton voltam, hamarosan találkozunk, addig is, ciao.